this is a somewhat different view than I've had in previous episodes, because I wanted to have that blackboard drawing. Now, the main book that gives an account of this spiritual development of the earth and all the spiritual beings, the hierarchies involved in what they did and what their tasks were and what their tasks are with respect to the human being and the earth, is accounted for in this book, the outline, or occult science and outline. And as you can see, it's a pretty hefty volume. It's around, what, 330 pages, 340 pages long. And so now we turn to the sad story of the apes and how they came into existence. Now, as I mentioned, an event, probably the most significant event up until at this point, well, at least up until the point of the incarnation of Christ, took place during the Lemurian epoch. Now, what happened was, and this was a repetition at a higher stage of development of what had occurred during the moon incarnation of the earth, was that conditions on the earth had become because everything is condensing, you know. I mean, the original shall we say, substance of which everything was composed was heat or warmth during Saturn, and then it condensed to air or gaseous type of state. Then it condensed to watery, and then it condensed further to a mineral condition. So we have these four elements, so to speak, and heat is a substance, and not recognized as such by modern physics, but it is. And the warmth we feel in our body is actually the Saturn atmosphere. So we still carry that with us, the Saturn environment, so to speak, when we have that feeling of warmth in our bodies, bodily warmth. Now, what has occurred during this condensation, and just since I'm reminding myself about this, what's happening now to the earth is dying, and our physico-chemical bodies are dying also. And in order for them to be, at least our physico-chemical bodies, to be, shall we say, rejuvenated, we have to undergo spiritual development in a concrete fashion, like I am giving you tonight. And that's why, I mean, my whole purpose of talking about Steiner stuff is not for me to regurgitate what Steiner has, at least my understanding of what Steiner has said and has written, as a proxy for you saying that you are studying Steiner. That's not it. What the purpose is for you to get these books that I mentioned during the course of the Mobuku Chronicles that are written by Steiner, the ones that I've talked about and referenced. So you start to study them. You know, you have to do the work. Trying to study Steiner through me or anybody else who's, you know, putting forward their understanding of what they have learned from Steiner just doesn't make it. No, we have to actually do the grunt work ourselves. It's like, in terms of as a comparison, you know, going to a macrobiotic cooking class and getting a wonderful cooking class given by a magnificent macrobiotic cooking teacher, you know, with all the recipes, and they prepare the meal in front of you, show you how to do it, and then you eat it, and then you go home and you do nothing more. I mean, what's the point? You gotta do the work. There's no substitute for it. And this is hard work. It takes a lot of effort. And it does cause, shall we say, difficulties of one kind and another. There's no getting around that. If you really take it seriously, that is, Steiner's material, and you really work at it. Now, okay, so the conditions had gotten to a point during the course of the Lemurian epoch where more exalted beings were finding it very difficult for them to continue their development. So they separated themselves out and they created another cosmic body. Remember, everything is still spiritual at this point. And this cosmic body is the origin of our sun. Not it can be. So they were sun beings, the most exalted of all the beings that were on the earth. And they had to move because they were being hampered in their development conditions. The atmosphere was getting too condensed and too dense and too, should we say, thick. So they left. Now the consequence, as a consequence, the atmosphere on the earth became extraordinarily dense and rigidified and hardened. And it became extremely difficult for souls to incarnate in physical bodies, because the thing became desiccated. Shall we say, the environment, the spiritual environment, became very desiccated and dry and arid and hardened. So many human souls could not incarnate. They weren't strong enough. So what they did, what happened was that certain beings created other cosmic bodies whereby human souls that could not incarnate because they weren't strong enough on the earth could find an abode where they could, should we say, be temporarily housed, to use the vernacular. And there were Venus beings and Mars beings and Jupiter beings and Saturn beings and Mercury beings and Venus beings. And they created these cosmic bodies to house, shall I say, to be an abode, spiritual abode for human souls who, for one reason or another, were not advanced enough, not strong enough to be able to incarnate on the earth. And things here, the environment here became so, shall we say, desiccated and so hardened and dried out that only the strongest human souls could incarnate. And even it got to the point where only 2 were left. So the story of Adam and Eve is true. It is a reality, spiritual reality. Meanwhile, the sun beings had noticed, of course, what was going on. So they compelled a certain group of beings to leave. And these were the moon beings. And they were, shall we say, compelled to depart from the earth. And they this particular cosmic body that they originated through being compelled to leave the earth by the sun beings, who are the most exalted of all the sun beings, of all the spiritual hierarchies. The sun beings are the most exalted, and the leader of the sun beings is what we name today by the designation Christ. So Christ is the leader of our cosmos, the king of all. At any rate, they compelled the moon beings to depart and form the cosmic body of the moon, which is now our moon that we see every night. Well, not necessarily every night, but we have the moon cycle every 28¼ days. And right now I think it's in the 7th. It's waxing. We have a waxing moon, I think. It's a good idea to keep an eye on what's happening in the heavens. So you know where we are in the moon phase. And like we have Orion coming up, the herald of winter, the hunter. And so get to know the starry skies at night. There's a great, if you have an iPhone, there's a great application called the Starry Skies. Really good. See that you can just look at the stars every night, where they are, what their names are, what constellations. It's really excellent to have that. Anyway, so what happened was, as a result of the moon beings being compelled to leave, is that the rhythm of the earth was set up between the activity of the sun and the moon, and was the proper rhythm. It was gradually came into motion so that human development could take place in the right way. And so what happened is that gradually Adam and Eve could create progeny who then could have souls incarnate in them, who would be coming from the other cosmic bodies, you know, Saturn beings. So we have, in other words, we have on the earth today people, because we've, you know, and I read yesterday, it just shows how really sorry and totally pathetic people's ignorance is of our spiritual heritage. I mean, this guy said yesterday, I read it, and once I read this, I said, forget it. He said, you are unique. You've never been here before, and you'll never be here again. Well, we are all unique, that's for sure. But we have definitely been here before, and we're definitely going to be here again. We have the one individuality that goes through many incarnations. And in each incarnation, a different personality arises. Because, you know, we're not always incarnated as male, necessarily. We're not always incarnated as Caucasian, necessarily. You know, obviously, even if you're Caucasian and you incarnated as a Spaniard, you're definitely going to have a different personality than if you're incarnated as a Russian. I mean, that's obvious. But the same individuality passes over from one incarnation to the next. So you mean, that's what I mean by people, all this spiritual talk that's going on there, it's just a lot of totally empty rhetoric and hollow phrases and just a lot of complete blather. People just do not know this stuff. And it's time we became acquainted with it. Okay, so the progeny of Adam and Eve began